As we leave Water Street Hotel, we're going to travel along Water Street. This area of Apalachicola maintains the city's working waterfront. Apalachicola has lived off the water since its inception. It was in 1822 that Apalachicola was established as an official port. This waterfront from time to time has been the major port for the transport and sale of lumber, cotton, sponges, and of course, seafood. On your left, you will see the original power plant that supplied all of the power to Apalachicola. Attached to it, you will see the original ice houses where giant ice blocks were stored for the use of local businesses and residents. You will notice on your right 2 of the 36 brick and concrete warehouses that lined Water Street in the 1830s. These warehouses were built to allow for the storage and shipping of goods. Originally, they were all 3 stories tall. The building right there is the future home of the Apalachicola Cultural Arts Center, where the Plein Air event takes place.
The original intent of the plein air was really documenting the landscape and the people and the oystering industry and the shrimping industry, because we don't know how long that's going to be with us. And it's a documentation of this time in our history in Apalachicola, and all of the paintings depict so much of that history and the landscape.
Anybody that takes a wage from the water, their hands are pretty beaten up. They've been fixing their outboard motors for their entire lives. They've been pulling nets and lines and so on. But James Cain, in his younger days, was the toughest guy on the coast repeatedly, and he fought in all the juke joints all around the bay. And eventually he went to Birmingham, won a Golden Glove championship, and then he turned around and broke his hand. When he broke his hand, that was the end of his boxing career, and he came back to the water. And this was his entire life. He still loves the water. The water gets in their blood, it flows in their veins. When I came here, I was inspired by the culture, by these faces and hands that were sculpted by the elements. Yeah, this is what is most compelling, I think, for me about Apalachicola. The folks, the people, I think, are why I did stay on here and feel compelled to make portraits of them in their natural environment.
On your right, you will see the Grady Building. It is a good example of how preservationists have been able to restore historically significant buildings. Originally built in the 1840s, it burned down in the fire of 1900 and was rebuilt within a year afterwards. Over here, you will see Battery Park, the recreational boating basin of the city. This is the home of the annual Florida Seafood Festival. We are now traveling down Bay Avenue. Many of the mansions on this street date back to 1850s. On your right, you will see the old convent. It has been restored and is now a private residence. Next, the White House is an example of Florida Empire architecture. Nearly 250 buildings in Apalachicola are listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and nearly 900 buildings are listed in the National Historic District. On the left is Lafayette Park, which is frequently used for weddings and concerts sponsored by the Elsie Newell Foundation. First Baptist Church was built in 1902, and it still has its original brass lock on its front door, and the Gothic-style stained glass windows are also original. This house is Tom Pope's house, a renowned architect from Key West who designed the Water Street Hotel. As we approach the roundabout here, you will see the John Gorey Museum. Dr. John Gorey lived in Apalachicola in the mid-1800s and treated patients with tropical diseases such as yellow fever and malaria, which prompted him to seek a method of keeping his patients cool in the hot summer months by cooling the air in the patient's bedroom. Dr. John Gorey's invention ultimately became the first ice machine and the precursor to the invention of air conditioning. We are now passing St. Patrick's Catholic Church. It was originally built in 1850, but it burned down that same year. It was rebuilt 2 years later. The new building you see here today was built in 1928 and restored in 1994. The original building was moved just next door where the priest lives today. Here you will see the Gibson Inn. When the hotel first opened in 1907, it charged $1.25 a night for a room. The white building on the right is the old Armory building. It dates back to 1901 and is named for Pierce C. Combs, an early active member of the local militia. The Armory is one of only 2 owned by the state of Florida. Inside the arched portal is a cannon that was used during the Civil War to signal Confederate soldiers that Union forces were approaching. As I mentioned before, most of downtown Apalachicola was burned in 1900 as a result of a fire. Therefore, most of the buildings in the commercial area are relatively new, relatively speaking. Most of them are still over 100 years old. Here's our local post office. It was first a customs house in 1923, and it has a basement that has a tunnel that crosses under the street and joins other tunnels, but nobody knows its purpose. On the right is the Owl Cafe, a well-recognized favorite restaurant.
Apalachicola probably has the best restaurants per capita than any place I have been in. Everything's pretty much casual, but you can get a gourmet meal one night and eat fried seafood down at the street. The next, oysters on the other side. This is the best oysters in the world, and we have plenty of them, and the restaurants do just a fabulous job, in cooking the seafood. There's not many places in anywhere that I've been to that has so many restaurants for a small town. We have a population in Apalachicola of about 2,500 total people, and we have a lot of very nice restaurants, and you can choose to, if you're here a week, you can eat in a different restaurant every night.
On the right, you will see the Apalachicola Sponge Exchange, which dates back to 1840. It is one of 2 warehouses that stored sponges and represents the profitable sponge exchange that was prevalent in the 19th century. Across the street is the historic Dixie Theater.
The Dixie Theater was originally built in 1912 and opened in 1913 as a vaudeville house. It became a motion picture house in 1915 and remained so until 1967 when it was closed and shuttered. And in 1994, my parents, Rex and Cleo Partington, and I came here and purchased the remains from the city and began the restoration and recreation of the Dixie Theater. We opened in 1998 with our first professional season, and we just finished our 12th professional season.
On the left, you will see the Rainey House. It was built in 1838 by David Greenway Rainey and his wife. The Greek Revival style house was the center of political and social activities in its heyday. David Rainey was very involved in his adopted town of Apalachicola and even served as mayor for 2 years. On your left is the famous Chestnut Street Cemetery.
One of the fun things to do when you visit this area is to walk through the old cemeteries. There's a cemetery downtown that has old ship captains buried there, just a lot of history. That's just a fun thing to do, is walk through and try to regain the knowledge of this area through its history.